Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. So I'm James Woodcock, and I'm known as the International Manager at International Synergies. My role is to support local teams in different countries to deliver what we call industrial symbiosis programs. So one of the things that we do in that are these business opportunities workshops that I'm going to be talking about. The presentation is going to fall into two bits. The first bit is going to be a bit of an introduction about industrial symbiosis itself. And then the second bit will be explaining what happens in the workshop that we're going to be holding. So the first thing is what actually is industrial symbiosis? So in nature, symbiosis is where two organisms work together for mutual benefit. So you can see here you've got a picture of a crocodile and a plover bird. Now what happens here is the crocodile's got a very ancient jaw system. It can basically move up and down, but it's not a chewer. That means it gets bits of food stuck between its teeth. If they stay there, they were going to rot and they will affect the teeth, and the teeth of the crocodile will fall out and it won't be able to eat anything. What happens in nature is that the plover bird comes along, gets the food, picks it out from the teeth of the crocodile, and the plover bird gets a free meal. The crocodile gets the teeth that don't rot and fall out. That's symbiosis because the crocodile doesn't eat the bird. Both get mutual advantage from that. And really what industrial symbiosis does is it gets that and it uses that type of relationship between companies in the types of industrial symbiosis systems across the world. Some are managed, some are just natural, but they all have a certain amount of commonality between them. So the first is that you get a network of diverse organizations. So the greater number of different types of industry that you can get in an IS program, the better, because that gives you more options to do different things with any resources that you get. The next is that they foster eco-innovation and long-term culture change. Now, what we mean by that is it means that people look at a resource and say, well, what can I actually do with that? And as companies get more and more into industrial symbiosis, they can start to think differently about how they actually operate. And that's the long-term culture change that we're talking about there. And then the third thing is that they yield these profitable transactions. We're trying to actually do this from a business point of view. Yes, we know that there'll be environmental benefits and things like that, but the important thing is that there is doing an industrial symbiosis connection between companies makes business sense. So it means that you can you'll get a better supply of inputs rather than using virgin. You will have value-added destinations for, and this is the important part, non-product outputs. Your products that you make as a company have a sales channel. What we're looking at are the resources that you have within your company that do not have a beneficial output at the minute. And then it gives you improved business and technical processes because it forces you to look at your business and the processes that go on in your business and say, how can we make these better? How can we make them more efficient? Do we have things where we don't necessarily segregate, and segregation makes it more efficient and can yield a better result for our company as a whole? So as an example of how things used to be, so in the old days, you might look at a foundry and then its waste would go to, it'd be disposed of. What happens with industrial symbiosis is we find alternative routes for the waste resources that come out of that foundry. So you can see here, it can be used, the slag pile from a foundry can be used as road construction aggregate, different types of flooring, or it could go into the brick and masonry type of business. So we're looking for alternatives. And if you think about disposing of things to landfill, there's usually a cost associated with that. Whereas down here, you might be looking at either it can go away for no cost or it goes away being sold. So that's where your profitability comes from, in that you are no longer paying disposal costs, but you are potentially generating revenue. So the NISP was developed in the UK and it ran there for 7 years. And these are I'm going to take you through the results and what we actually found from that program that initially ran, and then talk about how that spread out across the world. So the first thing that we found is through these business opportunities is that it increased a lot of the areas where business need what they do to be better. So, yeah, you can see here that it increases sales, profit margins go up. It gives you a demand pull on innovation. You know, how can I do this better, or how can I use this other thing? So it helps drive innovation. Sorry, yes. Okay, what does NISP mean? Good question, Ansgar. NISP is an acronym, and it stands for the National Industrial Symbiosis Program. So that was a facilitated program that occurred in the UK and that we spread throughout the world in other countries. So the workshop that we're going to talk about is one aspect of that. But then we have facilitators who are people in the program who then go and work with companies to realize the identified opportunities that we find. So I was explaining about the things that industrial symbiosis program benefits, but it also reduces things that companies want to actually get rid of. So, you know, your dependency on virgin resources can go down. It can make people more resource efficient with what regards to water, and decrease things like carbon emissions and landfill costs. And these are the results from the program that we ran in the UK for 7 years. So one of the things I want you to concentrate on is this bottom area here, which shows the financial aspects of what the program achieved. So you can see here that if you looked at it in a 1 year scenario of what happened within a year by year, you can see that we had cost savings of around 200 million and additional sales of 200 million. Whereas if you look at it over a 5 year period, where we look at synergies and say they ran for 5 years, you can see that we achieved over nearly 2.5 billion euros worth of economic value add to companies. Whilst doing that, we also had a major impact on the environmental side of things. So vastly decreased the amount of waste going to landfill and decreased the amount of carbon that was liberated into the air, because as not throwing things away, and not using virgin, we were decreasing the amount of embodied carbon in a lot of the resources that were being used. So I just want to give you a few case study examples now. And this first example really is to try and illustrate that when we talk about resources, the mind naturally goes to physical, material resources, but we're actually talking about resources in a much wider context. So this is a case study about Terra Nitrogen, who are a fertilizer manufacturer, and John Barder, who are a tomato grower. So Terra Nitrogen, in the production of their fertilizer, liberated heat and liberated carbon dioxide, which they had no useful outlet for. They also had some spare land. And at a workshop similar to the one that we're going to be running, the two companies met, and John Barder was saying, well, look, we're looking for land because we want to build a new greenhouse facility on an industrial scale to grow tomatoes for supermarkets. And what ended up happening is that they built the greenhouse on the land that Terra Nitrogen had, and then piped in the waste heat and carbon dioxide into the greenhouse. This meant that John Barder made a lot of savings. Number one, they didn't have to buy virgin land. They could rent the land from Terra Nitrogen. Number two, they weren't having to put in all of the production equipment to actually generate the heat and generate the carbon dioxide. And that ended up saving them something in the region of £10 million worth. They still invested 15 million in the construction unit of it, but it would have cost another 10 million had they had to do all of the generation of the carbon and the heat themselves. This example is about a company being able to change its business model. So they're an animal renderer. They're taking animals and process them. But what they did is they worked with us about what could they do. And we kept going back to that company to expand the effect of industrial symbiosis. So the first thing we did is we looked at some of the bigger wastes that they have. And the one that we identified as being the most profitable, potentially, was meat and bone meal. And the first thing we did is connect them to a cement company so that they could take that meat and bone meal. What happened, though, is that the use of that as a fuel by the cement company was so successful that other cement companies heard about that being as an option. And they started to approach the company to say, can we also actually have access to your meat and bone meal? And before long, what was happening, it went from being a cost to landfill, which was then replaced by a cost of sending it to cement factories, but at a lower cost than sending it to landfill, to a point where the cement factories were buying the meat and bone meal from the company. So it went from a cost to a revenue generator. We then looked at other aspects of what they could do. And the final thing that we looked at was the building of an anaerobic digestion plant on site that meant that they could then take other wastes from the site and put them through the anaerobic digestion process, generate methane, and use that to generate electricity that they then sold into the grid. So they still do the rendering, but they are also a clean energy provider to the electricity grid. Fundamentally change in their business model from where it was when we first started working with them. So those were just two examples, and honestly, we've got a lot of different examples as well, and we'll add a few more in during the actual workshop. We're going to look now at just, I keep talking about that this started in the UK and it's gone further. What you can see here are all the different countries where what the workshop process, the facilitation process has actually gone into those countries, and they've then actually delivered this program within those countries to great effect. So what we're doing in Germany is part of what we call the Sharebox program, and what we're doing is developing a system that will hopefully replace the facilitator part. It will have the intelligence of the facilitator within that system, and as part of that, we're running the programs to actually then collect that data and use that to help you, because during the life of the program, we'll work with you to help realize those ideas, but also it will generate information within the system that will enable it to actually help people in the future. It's part of the circular economy, Claudia. So just to address your question, it is a concept between the concepts of cradle to cradle life cycle economy. Yeah, it's been going now. Industrial symbiosis has been going for quite a while, and NISP itself was developed in 2003. So it's been going that long and kind of been developed alongside some of these things as part of the wider remit of the circular economy. So it works well alongside things like cleaner production and cleaner design, because you can build IS into those processes within your project and your product. And these other concepts, it can take part of them, it can feed into them as well. And because it works with all types of resources, it's not limited. So it's not just limited to biorefineries, but it can work alongside biorefineries, and they can be part of the the actual process and the program that's going on. Right. So now what I'm going to do is, now that we understand the concept of industrial symbiosis and what it is, it's basically finding beneficial use of underutilized resources, finding beneficial use in production process of somebody else. What we're going to do is talk about the workshop itself. And we use the workshop to generate both knowledge of the resources that are out there and ideas between companies themselves. So what we do, it is a really simple process. It's very low tech, and we spent a lot of time finding out whether it is worth going higher tech on the day of the workshop. Outside of the workshop, it is quite high tech, but within the workshop itself, we found that keeping it low tech is very good, because it stimulates interaction and stimulates networking between companies, which then stimulate ideas. Whereas if you go high tech, everybody just starts looking at their iPad and doesn't talk to each other. So what we do is we find out what resources you as a company have and what resources you as a company want. And we then match people together, exactly like a dating agency. We match you together and say, right, here's the potential match. Do you want to progress it? And how do you want to progress it? And how can we help you progress? That's the process. I've mentioned before that for us, resources are anything. They're not just materials, but they obviously do include materials, but it can be expertise or knowledge. So if you are a company and you've done a project and you've gained knowledge of how to actually deliver that project, and somebody else is doing something similar and you don't feel they're a threat to as you as competition, then yeah, you can share that knowledge with people. If you've got underutilized capacity in whether it's equipment, laboratory, or such like. So for example, if you've got, we've had examples where somebody has a grinding machine, but it only operated 8 hours a day. So what happened then is another production facility would rent that grinding machine outside of that hour, so that they didn't have to then build one themselves. And it was much more cost effective for those two companies to work together and get that machine operating as long as it can actually do. Can be logistics. So you might have a transport fleet that is full whenever it's going away from you, but when it comes back, it's always empty. So you might be able to do logistics as backhauls, whether you've got spare warehouse facilities, or in the case, similar to the case of with a fertilizer company, you might have spare land. And then there's water and energy and things like that as well. But the key thing to remember on this as well is not core business. You've got your sales channels for your core business. Right. So how can you solve problem matching different companies and knowledge and information and get people to talk in an open-minded stage? Aspects of confidence. So we're really talking about here confidentiality and people being worried. So the good thing about what we're going to be doing is that you choose what level of information you are comfortable with bringing into that workshop. So what we find is you have companies and they may well be happy talking about certain resources, but they look at other resources and say, you know what, we don't really want to talk about this bit yet. Let's work about this. and let's ignore that, which is fine, because during the actual workshop, as you'll see in a minute, you get the opportunity to give you 5 haves and 5 wants. Now, the chances are you may well have a lot more than that within your company. So choose your 5 priority resources that you want, that you're happy to talk about, and don't bring in the things that you are wary about telling people about, that you're uncomfortable about bringing into the public domain. That's easy. And that generally seems to work. Companies seem okay bringing in resources that they're happy to talk about, and they're quite happy to leave the others around. So that's how we deal with confidentiality, really. This here is a green form. So we have green forms and we have yellow forms. The green forms are about the resources that you have, and it's divided into 2 bits: a left-hand side that you fill in, and a right-hand side that other people fill in. On the left-hand side, the information we need is the table number, because the workshop is divided into different tables, and these resources are going to be seen by everybody in the room. So we need to know the table number so that we can backtrack where this resource came from if there were any questions about it later on in the day. We have your company name and your company number, and then you tell us what is the name, what is the description of the resource that you have, and then you tell us how much of it you have, where it is, and how often is it available. There is also a yellow form that is for those resources that you want, and it works exactly the same. Table number, who you are, what's your resource, how much is it of it is there, where is it, and how often is it available. Then, once we've completed our forms, we read them out to everybody on our table, and if they want it, they sign up on the right hand side saying where they are, who they are, and how much of it they want. We do have guidelines for filling in the forms, so we would say only 1 resource per slip. And the reason we say only 1 resource per slip is that the other person, if you've put more than 1 resource on a slip, we don't know which of those resources the other person has actually signed up for. We do ask for an idea of quantity, location, and time scale, and the quantity can be what we would call a ballpark. So I don't need to have the exact, but it's really good if you can let me know whether it's 1 ton, 10 tons, 50 tons, 100 tons or more, like that, and build it into sort of those areas rather than try and give me the exact figure. Yeah, the terms, the English terms, lots of material and everywhere, aren't really helpful. So we ask people to avoid that, because lots of material for one company might not be lots of material for another company. And then because everybody else is going to read these resource slips, we ask that if somebody's got particularly bad writing, they write in capitals or something. Because what happens is we're going to take this away and we're going to put it on our database system so that we can produce you all a report first, and then also as we run more workshops, we would then other people would be able to see the resources that you've put in. Doubly so in this one, because I don't speak German very well, and I'm going to be entering this data onto the system. So strange writing I'm going to struggle with. Right. So somebody's asked, can I give you an example of a realistic and an unrealistic idea of resources? Okay. So in all honesty, I'll talk about 2 things. So as far as a resource goes, I'm happy to have pretty much every resource except for the following. So don't put products in, because as I said before, you've already got them. If don't come and just say act as a consultant, where you just sign up for everything because you want to know everybody's details, because honestly you're going to get everybody's contact details anyway outside through the report, so that's okay. And really, with regards to an unrealistic idea, within the context of this, we say we don't really worry about whether ideas are unrealistic, because what we're going to do is outside of the workshop, we get a report sent out to you, and that's when people evaluate, okay, is this a sensible idea or is it not? And at that point, that would be where you would look at it and say, well, technically, is this possible? If it's not possible now, would it be possible if we did some research and R&D? And does it make financial business sense? Now, those are the sorts of equations that you bring into the idea outside of the workshop, not necessarily inside the workshop, because they require a bit of thought. But what we're trying to do within the workshop is try and think about the widest possible ideas and the widest possible options that could be available for resources. Is that okay? Is that okay as an explanation to your question? If you could just say yes or no. If it's no, I'll go a little bit further into it. But if it's yes, I'll move on to the next slide. So I'll just wait for that. Brilliant. So once we've filled in all of our green and yellow forms, what we then do is read the forms to everybody on the table. So and we will have looked at the who's come in before, and we will have tried to pair what we think are sensible company pairings on a table. Sometimes, we might get that a bit different, but that's the general way that we try to do it. So that when you read out your form to everybody on the table, if somebody on your table is interested in that resource, they'll sign up to it. And everybody on the table gets to read out all of their resource to everybody else on that table. What we then do, you all stay put on your table, but we then swap all the resources between the tables, and you get to read out everybody else's resources as well. And the people on the next table get to read your resources. And then once we've done that, we swap it again. So by the end of the morning, well, we're doing it in the afternoon. By the end of the afternoon, everybody in that workshop will have seen everybody else's resources and will have been able to have the opportunity to sign up to those resources should they wish. And when you're filling in your forms before you actually read them out, the types of things that we want you to do is to think about how might your waste be recovered or reprocessed. So could it be made into a raw material for somebody else? What raw materials and resources might you come across that you might be able to use within your own business? And again, we reiterate that for us, a resource, we not just want you to think about materials, but we want you to think about energy, water, logistics, spare capacity that you have, whether that's warehousing or production capacities, and expertise or knowledge. And that's really the introduction that we give to the workshop. And then what we actually do is run the workshop. So we'll separate you out into your tables. Each table will have what we call a facilitator, who is the person that will drive that table going forward. So you're not on your own just having to figure this out. They are there to help you, and they will run the actual table, making sure that everybody gets a time and a turn. Then what happens is we collect all that information in. We put that information on our database, and it will produce a report. Everybody gets their own individual report. And what is in that report is that you will be able to see the resources that you put in and who signed up for those resources, whether you put in a have or a want or both. You will get to see both of that. You will then also see other people's resources that you signed up for. And so that's the report that you will get. And generally you get that within a few days of the workshop. Yeah, we have to put all the data into the database and then it automatically produces the report. So it takes a couple of days to get all of that into the system. Now, what happens in a facilitated program is that after that, the facilitator will contact you and say, okay, how do you want us to help you progress some of these matches? And we will be contacting you post-workshop to actually talk that through with you about how you want to progress them and helping you actually work that forward. So that's it, really. That's my introduction to what goes on. So we're now moving to the have you got any questions phase of this. Any aspects of this that you would like me to elaborate on, or any questions that you've thought, what does that mean? I'm happy to answer them over the next 10-15 minutes. So I don't know if Andreas wants to quickly talk about what the process will be for signing up for the workshop.
I think it's better me, James.
Martin, okay, that would be great. Yeah, if you can talk about the process,
yes,
that would be great.
Yes. So thank you very much, James, for explaining us how this is done at the workshop. We welcome you at Gendorf at the Education Center of the Chemical Park of Gendorf on July the 5th, starting at 12 o'clock with a little lunch and starting the program at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It will take time until about 5 o'clock and it will be free of cost. I think you now have understood that it's worthwhile really to think in advance about which resources you could bring to the workshop and offer at the workshop or demand for in the workshop. And this is not kind of academic program to learn anything about industrial symbiosis. It's the actual creation of industrial symbiosis. So it is worthwhile to have a concrete interest in exchanging resources the way James has mentioned them. So you're very welcome to join our seminary, our workshop. And the only thing you have to do is to write an email with your contact data and just the statement that you want to participate to our email address info@chemiecluster-bayern.de. If you have any question, just write it down in your chat now or contact me right at the Chemical Cluster of Bavaria and I will be very happy to answer you. So
really, thank you.
I've now written down it. Please be sure to do this best by the end of the week, and the last deadline to do so is the 27th of June, because we have also planned our resources, lunch resources and so on, and we cannot do this after June 27th. Yes, very big thank you to the Chemical Park of Gendorf who made possible to do this at their site, at their premises. Yes, that's it. If you're interested in some more written information, I can send you, if you haven't got it yet, I can send you an information leaflet. Just contact me for this information leaflet, rudolf@chemiecluster-bayern.de. I just will write it down.
Claudia, when you say is there somewhere of an overview of the results of the workshop, are you talking about the workshop that you will attend or workshops in general?
So this is to read. I think James, Claudia is only for hearing in the session. She cannot.
No. She heard me, and she just mentioned the mentioned workshop. Yes. Okay, so the workshop that you attend. So what will happen as well? You will get your individual results, and there will be a one-page summary as well. And what that will give you is how many results, how many people attended, how many resources we've got, how many ideas were generated within the workshop, and you'll also get a list of who attended that workshop. We'll give you those results verbally on the day of the workshop because we're able to count them very quickly at the end through the process of what we do. But then, yes, there will be a one-page summary that we will send out the day after the workshop.
Okay. And then for all those who are interested but cannot come and join, just we are very happy if you tell others about them in your personal networks, in your institutional networks. So we are happy if the information about this workshop, I think maybe we have convinced you that this is really a very new thing, especially for Germany, and a very promising thing. And we would be very happy if you could spread this message among your personal networks. All right.
Okay, I think that's the end of the questions. So thanks a lot, everybody, for participation and listening to everything. I hope you did find it very useful, and I hope you can see the benefit of attending the workshop, and we'll see you in July.
Right. Thanks, James. And we will see you in July, James, and maybe as many as possible others may join us. And the bigger the event, the better it is.
Definitely. We want as many people there as possible because we get a lot more ideas. Okay.
Right then.
All right. I also want to thank you, James, and yeah, see you next time online.
Thanks a lot, Martin. I'll leave you to figure out the ending of the session.
Yes. So for everybody joining us today, as I said, we did a recording and we will do a follow-up on this live meeting as we send you the link to the recorded session. So have a good rest of the day and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Goodbye.